The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
Last time we discussed how people can approach psychological issues in terms of experiments and at least correlations in some cases, or causal studies through experiments. And we discovered that if you think about money, what happens? On average, you become more self-reliant but less willing to help, right? Okay. We discovered that if you just change the way that men and women approach each other at a dating event, you change their internal feelings and their external behaviors simply by who's approaching what, who's approaching whom. So, we learned all kinds of things that you might or might not have known unless you did the experiment. But for all these things that are our mental lives, our thoughts, our feelings, are all supported by our brains. And so for me personally, as a neuroscientist, I've always thought that the brain is one of the three amazing things out there in the natural world, which is the origins of the universe, the origin of life, right? And the brains that allow us to think and feel, perceive, and remember, really everything that we do comes from that. Okay, so here's this device, and I want to share with you just this phrase that people sometimes use, which is that your mind is what your brain does. That your mind is what your brain does, okay? And so the readings from Oliver Sacks for today kind of remind you of that. So there are two women who have seizures of various kinds, and what happens in them. So one is Mrs. O.C., 88-year-old woman, and what starts to happen to her? She starts to hear songs. And so powerfully, not just when you have a little song in your head, that it's hard for her to hear conversations, right? For her, a conversation like we're having now, it's as if the music stayed on really loud. It turns out she's having temporal lobe seizures. The temporal lobes are the parts of the brain that are terribly important for hearing. So music is something that we hear. And she has a right temporal lobe infarction. She's had an injury in the right temporal lobe. Music, for most of us, is more dependent on right hemisphere processes than the left, so that makes it unusual. And how does she feel about the whole process? So what's generating the songs, though? What's generating the songs that she hears? Yeah, her memory, her brain, right? Because in epilepsy, what's happening, neurons are firing. When neurons fire in organized patterns, those are memories, desires, physical actions, thoughts. When they're firing for no good reason, like in epilepsy, because of some brain difficulty, they just start firing. But the neurons that happen to be firing will drive certain mental processes that they normally support. In this case, the neurons that are firing away are ones that are involved in memory for songs and perception for songs. And when they fire, it's as if you heard the song itself. Because when you hear my voice or when you hear a song, you're never hearing the song. You're always hearing what your neurons are interpreting, the sound that comes to your ear. Your mind is what your brain does in that sense, in a very central way. If you had an injury in that part of the brain, you could be cortically deaf and never hear a sound, even though all the information came to your ear. So without your brain interpreting the environment, you wouldn't know what it is. But if your brain starts to fire on its own, that's just as good a signal as if you heard a song itself, because that is the stuff of hearing songs. So she enjoyed it, actually. She declined taking anticonvulsant medications because she felt it was a portal to her past, right? The songs that she heard were ones that reminded her of her life and were kind of pleasant to hear. It was like being in a nonstop highlight film of her life, okay? Or a highlight MP3, okay? So now, an opposite response to a similar phenomenon comes from a Mrs. O.M. in her 80s. She hears songs, but she also hears a lot of ringing and hissing, okay? It's not limited to the song itself. She doesn't mention any of this for how long? 4 years. She's hearing ringing, hissing songs. She knows, because her mind is fine, that they're coming from nowhere but inside her head. but she doesn't tell anybody. That's a huge burden, right? And